When you buy a new car, there's always going to be things that you dislike about it. This is my C5 Z06, and here are 5 things that I despise about this vehicle. Imagine having 405 horsepower, and your car tells you you can't shift from first to second, but it forces you to go into 4th gear. Why, Chevy? This is 2002. We don't need this. The very first thing I hate about this car is the stupid shifter. Not only does this shift knob just not feel right in your hand, but it's just dumb. So while leaving 1st gear, it usually will tell you that you can't shift into 2nd gear because it wants the car to be more economical. This is a Z06. It doesn't need that, right? So it'll force you to shift into 4th. The way to avoid that is to just rev the car out a little bit, but it's still really annoying. But the shifter itself is very notchy. I don't particularly care for the shifter, and a lot of people would agree with me when I say that. A big gripe of C5s is the shifter. A lot of people, a lot of owners, and people who have driven this say the shifter just doesn't feel good. A lot of people change this shifter for the C6 Z06 shifter because it's just a little bit more crisp. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree. The very first time, there was the second thing I hate about the car, but as I continued to drive it, I noticed the shifter more and more and more, and it really makes me want to replace it. Also, this is a square shift knob. I mean, it doesn't feel awful in my hand. I have pretty big hands, but it's just so big. I am not a fan of this shift knob whatsoever. I know a couple people do like it, but just going into the first complaint of this car, I have to say, I just am not a fan of that. Just doesn't feel good. Now my second complaint is also going to be a complaint of driving the car and shifting gears, and that's the clutch. Now, not the clutch itself, not the clutch pedal, but the actuation of the clutch. I find the bite point to be super odd. Now, doing research, not only is the shifter a place for concern, but the clutch master cylinder is also a thing people complain about. And that's the very first thing I noticed when driving this car. Now, I will say this, the car drives phenomenal. Just those 2 things could be just a little bit better. I'm parked at the gas station right now, and there's a cop sitting outside of the gas station, and I don't have a license plate on this car. So I'm gonna wait it out for a second. I managed to sneak out the back, and he didn't follow me, so I was actually worried there for a second. I don't have a plate on the car because Wisconsin takes like 3 to 4 weeks to actually issue license plates for cars that are 20 years older, special license plates. Now, before we move on to point number 3, I would like to elaborate a little bit on the shifter and why I don't like it. So, for the people who have never driven one of these cars, this shifter is very, very notchy. So when you go into 1st gear, you know, it feels like this could be in gear, but there's like that extra little step. Now, in most older cars, you would expect, oh, just the bushings are bad or the shifter needs a rebuild. But apparently these cars just came like that, and this is the best that it gets without changing the shifter. It is an old car, so I'll give it a little bit of a break, but it just is hard to shift. Not like hard as in a mechanically hard way, but just it doesn't feel right. Also, when you're trying to go into reverse, I mean, sometimes, I've done it multiple times, where I go into 5th instead. You go here, and you go up, and you try hitting reverse, but it ends up being 5th. I've done it a few times, and it's probably because I haven't got used to the car, but it's also just because the shifter just feels a little weird. Like, this would be 5th, while this would be reverse, or that's not even reverse. Like, it's hard to tell what gear you're putting the car in. And then coming down to the clutch pedal, just to elaborate on this a little bit more as well, it just feels a little odd, right? Doing this with my left foot, but like right here, it just feels like there's something wrong. It like has a very weird feeling to it, almost like on-off, but not quite like an on-off switch. It has a very odd bite point, and perhaps I'm just not used to it, and that's what I thought when I first drove the car, that, oh, I'm just not used to the bite point yet. But the more I've driven it, and the miles I have put on it are very slim, but I still haven't gotten used to the bite point. And I've driven a lot of manual cars. I know how to drive manual. It's just an odd feeling, and it is a complaint from some people, just not as big as the shifter is. I've had water spots on that back window for like a month and a half. Now number 3 is a little bit of a sweet spot, but this is the biggest problem that I have with this car, and the biggest problem that everyone really has, and it's the interior quality. And there's no other way to say this other than to just be direct. This is horrible. Like, honestly, kind of unacceptable for a $60,000 car in 2002. Now, we have to keep in mind that this interior is 21 years old at this point. But I've seen Miata interiors that are in better condition than this. Keep in mind, this car has 36,000 original miles. It's never been in the rain. It's never been in the snow. It's never been exposed to any serious elements. And just the level at which this interior has kind of fallen apart is astounding to me. The first thing that all of these cars have are the seat bushings. The seat rocks back and forth. Pretty much universal as far as these cars go, because the bushings just go bad. It's a cheap fix, but still annoying that you have to do that. Now, like I said, this car is extremely well preserved, but it still has a tear on the driver's seat right there. All of these cars with the Z06 seats have tears on them. Even the base models do. They tear from right here. And most of them you'll see a tear just going all the way across. I'm lucky that it's only this little bit, and the passenger seat looks like it's never even been sat in. So that's why that isn't having any wear. But there is that wear there that is crazy to me, that it tore and tears so easily. Then arguably the worst of all of it are these buttons on the side and the door card itself. Not only does the door card feel like it's about to fall off the door every time you close it, but these are all rubber buttons. Why Chevy decided to do rubber buttons is beyond me, but these usually don't hold up. This is an immaculate shape. How did they think that was gonna hold up to the test of time? Also, these cars have heads-up displays, and it's really annoying to fix when your heads-up display doesn't work. And guess what? I'm pretty sure my car has it, and it doesn't work. It's gonna be so annoying to fix. But it's just like the cheapness and things like that. I mean, the biggest thing I really have to complain about is the door. Every time I go to shut the door, I honestly feel like I'm about to tear the door card off of the door. Now, I have a BMW from the E36 generation. I have a Z3M, and that car's handles literally fall off, and this is worse than that. I've ripped on the interior a lot, but this seat, driving position, and everything about the positioning of driving is actually really good, and I have to give Chevy that, but just everything else is like, dude. Imagine if Chevy in the new Z06 gave you the keys from a Silverado, the steering wheel and center console out of a Chevy Cobalt, and rubber plastic buttons that are gonna fall apart after 3 years. I mean, to an extent they still did that, but I mean, this was bad. Like, this was bad. Okay, wait, before we do that, you guys have to hear this. Oh, it just feels so cheap. I mean, these cars are a bargain right now, but I can't imagine going to the dealership in 2002. I mean, our expectations have gone up a lot since 2002, and cars just have got more complicated and better technically, from a technology standpoint and a quality standpoint, or the plastics have got better. Now, the fourth thing is a little weak, but it's the FRC, the fixed roof coupe, and how they designed it. Now, I don't hate how the fixed roof coupe looks, but it's just like the inside of it that I don't like. Let me show you. So if I come here, pop the trunk, first of all, there's no real place to grab the trunk, and I'm assuming it used to pop more when it was new, but with age, the struts have gone bad, so it's really hard to get your fingers underneath it. But once you do, this is your trunk right here. I mean, what is this? This makes no sense. So you have a little place for a tire inflation kit, you have another place right here on this side for a little something, and then you just have like a divot, like a drop. Like, you can't store anything in this trunk. You come behind the seats and you have like a rear parcel shelf right here, and it flows into the trunk. But there's like absolutely no storage or sensible storage in here at all. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Why was this designed how it was designed? Maybe for structural rigidity, I can understand that the fixed roof coupe had to come down like this to a certain extent or something like that. The whole point of making the FRC the fixed roof coupe was so that there would be more structural integrity, and for the Z06, it would be more rigid. But when you think about it, this car isn't like a hardcore extreme track car. It's very, very tame for being a Z06. I mean, yes, it's still a sports car, very much so, but maybe I'm spoiled, and I just don't see the point of them doing this and taking away so much practicality in the cars. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. Now the trunk, the more I use it, is starting to work a little bit more. This car is parked for a very long time before I bought it, but it doesn't pop as far as it should, so it makes it annoying to grab, and that's just something I have to live with. And I find it to be very annoying. Now I gotta give this car a lot of breaks because this thing is 21 years old and it's still a phenomenal car for the price. You gotta keep that in mind. This final thing is 100% totally a nitpick, and there's probably a reason why they did this, but this wheel gap right here is atrocious. Just look at it. The car does have some front rake to it, meaning that the front is lower than the rear, but look at how big the wheel gap in the rear is. Imagine if it was a couple inches lower in the front, a couple inches lower in the back, it would look just perfect. And that's something you can do aftermarket, and I'm sure there's a reason the old men who bought these cars probably wouldn't be happy that their Z06 was slammed to the ground from the factory. Oh no, the race car is doing race car things, right? But I guess they have to abide to certain regulations, make them semi-practical on the roads. Obviously you can't slam the cars from factory. The wheel fitment is actually really good, just it needs to be lower. Now to conclude this video, I'm sure I'm gonna get a little bit of hate because I've been ripping on this car this entire video, but honestly those 5 things are minor in some circumstances, or they can be fixed with modifications, and some people, it doesn't even matter to them, right? Now, if you're saying the interior doesn't matter to you and you think that that's not cheap, well, then we'll have problems and we can beef it out in the comments. But everything else, I mean, some people will say, oh, the shifter's fine, and yeah, it might be fine, or the master cylinder's fine, and to you it might be fine. I don't like it. I don't like the shifter. The fixed roof coupe is awkward to me, and it takes away practicality, right? It might be a weird word to use in a sports car, but it does. I mean, the regular one is a hatchback. It has a hatch on it, not a hatchback, but the regular car is a hatch, and it has a lot of room in the back. I mean, people have taken naps in the back of regular C5, C6s that don't have the fixed roof coupe design that this car does. Now, there's a reason they did it, but I think they could have just done it differently and better than how they did it. But I'm not a Chevy engineer from 2002, right? I wasn't even born when this car was produced. Now, with all those things being said, I really do like the car, and it has honestly exceeded my expectations in the driving, the power, and just how it feels. This car really makes itself feel different from everything else on the road. It makes you feel like you're driving something special, which not a lot of cars do nowadays. The C5 Z06 is a phenomenal car. If you're thinking about getting one, I highly recommend it. But those are just some things that I personally just can't stand about the car. Now, this was supposed to be my in-between car, but I kind of want to change the shifter, change the master cylinder and the clutch, just to see how they feel. Because I have a feeling this car would be a completely different animal with just $2,000 or $3,000 worth of modifications. Anyway, subscribe and maybe we'll do something dumb with the car. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you check out other videos from the channel. That's all I got. Yeah, it's still a fun car.